The unexpected visitor. The three things Mai Lin knew with absolute certainty were that heritage pigs were worth every bit of the trouble they caused, that her grandmother's recipes could probably end wars if given the chance, and that whatever had just landed in her east pasture was definitely not from the Department of Agriculture. Mai Lin shaded her eyes against the setting sun, watching as steam rose from a vessel that resembled a massive teardrop hammered from copper and obsidian. The tall grass around it had flattened in a perfect circle, the evening breeze carrying away the last wisps of displacement energy. She adjusted her worn canvas hat and reached for the shotgun she kept mounted on her ATV. Not to use it, necessarily, but because her father had always said that introductions went smoother when both parties had equal reason to be polite. Well, she muttered to herself as the vessel's surface rippled like water, this is definitely going to complicate harvest season. A seam appeared in the smooth metal, widening into an opening from which emerged a figure that Mai Lin's brain initially refused to categorize. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with a body that suggested both reptile and bird, covered in scales that shifted from deep crimson to burnt copper as it moved. A ridge of darker protrusions ran from its head down its spine, and folded against its back were what could only be described as wings. The creature stepped forward with the deliberate grace of a diplomat, or perhaps a predator. Mai Lin wasn't entirely sure there was a difference. Its eyes were vertical slits of amber that fixed on her with unnerving intelligence. "Greetings, cultivator of organic sustenance," the creature said, its voice surprisingly melodious despite the slight rasp. "I am Tarask, third envoy of the Draconian Consortium." Mai Lin decided based on something in the voice, made a gesture that looked like a military salute crossed with a courtly bow. "I require your assistance in a matter of interstellar diplomacy." Mai Lin lowered her shotgun fractionally. "You've got the wrong farm. The government research station is about 40 miles west." Tarask tilted her head, an oddly bird-like gesture. "No, I am precisely where I intended to be." She extended a hand, or claw, that held what appeared to be a small, translucent tablet. "Your establishment was identified in our research as producing artisanal pork products of exceptional quality. This assessment was made by something called Regional Culinary Quarterly." Despite the absurdity of the situation, Mai Lin felt a flush of pride. That review had doubled her farm-to-table restaurant bookings overnight. "That's accurate. But what does my pork have to do with interstellar diplomacy?" Tarask's scales rippled in what might have been the equivalent of a shrug. "Everything, potentially. The Galactic Assembly convenes in 7 Earth days. The consortium seeks advantage in trade negotiations. Our analysts have determined that unique sensory experiences, what you might call delicacies, often prove more persuasive than logical arguments when dealing with certain species." Mai Lin blinked. "You want to bribe aliens with my pork." "Bribe implies corruption," Tarask said, her head ridge flattening slightly. "This is cultural exchange leveraged for diplomatic advantage. And not just your pork, but all distinctive Earth cuisine. Your planet's culinary diversity is unprecedented in our experience." The sun had dipped below the horizon now, leaving them in the blue half-light of dusk. In the distance, Mai Lin's heritage pigs, the expensive, pampered creatures whose lineage she could trace back 6 generations, snuffled contentedly, oblivious to their sudden cosmic importance. "Why me?" Mai Lin asked. "Why not some celebrity chef or major food corporation?" Tarask's eyes narrowed, the amber glow intensifying. "Authenticity. Our analysis indicates that true culinary value derives from traditional methods and cultural significance. Corporate food products lack soul." She said the last word carefully, as if it were a concept she had recently learned. Mai Lin couldn't help but laugh. "So alien food critics also hate processed food. That's actually reassuring." For the first time, Tarask's expression changed to something Mai Lin could recognize. A slight curve of her scaled mouth that might have been amusement. "The appreciation of genuine artistry appears to be a universal constant." Look, Mei Lin said, finally lowering her shotgun completely. This is a lot to process. How about we continue this conversation inside? It's getting cold, and I was about to start dinner anyway. She paused. Do you eat? I consume nutrients, yes, Tarask replied, though our digestive processes differ significantly. However, observation of your preparation methods would be valuable research. 10 minutes later, Mei Lin found herself in the surreal position of cooking dinner, while an alien diplomat sat at her kitchen island, meticulously recording every movement with a device that hovered just above her scaled shoulder. The farmhouse kitchen, with its mix of modern appliances and 100-year-old fixtures, had seen many strange visitors: food critics, agricultural students, the occasional lost hiker, but never an extraterrestrial observer. Mei Lin pulled a container from her refrigerator. This is leftover smoked pork shoulder from yesterday. I was planning to make fried rice with it. She hesitated. Do you want to try some? Tarask leaned forward, nostrils flaring. My analysis equipment detects 27 distinct aromatic compounds, several of which are unfamiliar to our database. Her amber eyes fixed on the container. Yes, for research purposes, I should sample it. With careful movements, Mei Lin cut a small piece of the pork and placed it on a plate. Tarask examined it from several angles before delicately picking it up with clawed fingers. She placed it in her mouth, and for a moment there was complete silence in the kitchen. Then Tarask's head ridge extended fully, flaring like a peacock's tail. Her eyes widened, the vertical pupils dilating to near circles. This, she said, her voice vibrating with what Mei Lin recognized as emotion, regardless of species, this is extraordinary. It's just pork shoulder, Mei Lin said, though she couldn't help feeling pleased. Slow smoked over hickory for about 12 hours, with my grandmother's spice rub recipe. No, Tarask said, looking down at the plate with something like reverence. It is much more than that. There is memory in this food, tradition, care. She looked up at Mei Lin. Our scientists have long theorized that consciousness itself leaves trace imprints on physical matter. I believe your cooking confirms this theory. Mei Lin wasn't sure how to respond to that. She turned back to her wok, heating it while she chopped garlic and ginger. So this galactic assembly, she said, changing the subject. What exactly happens there? Tarask seemed to collect herself, her ridge slowly folding back down. 317 species will send representatives to discuss trade routes, resource allocation, and territorial boundaries. The outcomes will determine interstellar policy for the next 17 Earth years. And the Draconian Consortium wants what exactly? Access to certain mineral-rich systems currently under dispute, Tarask said, watching as Mei Lin cracked an egg into the hot wok. Particularly the Vega Quadrant, where crystalline formations necessary for our long-range propulsion systems are abundant. Mei Lin stirred the egg quickly, then added rice. And you think my food will help you get mining rights? Perhaps, Tarask said. The primary opposition comes from the Muldarian Federation, a species whose entire culture revolves around sensory experiences. They consider themselves the galaxy's arbiters of taste and use this cultural superiority as leverage in negotiations. So you want to show them up, Mei Lin said, adding the pork to the wok. Use my cooking to prove they're not as special as they think. Tarask's scales rippled in that strange shrugging motion again. Essentially, yes, if humans can produce culinary experiences that surpass Muldarian capabilities, their position is weakened. The kitchen filled with the aroma of frying rice, garlic, and smoked pork. Mei Lin added a splash of soy sauce, some diced vegetables, and a drizzle of sesame oil. And what does Earth get out of this arrangement? I assume we're not officially part of your galactic politics yet. Protection, Tarask said simply. Your planet exists in a contested region. The consortium can ensure it remains undisturbed during its development. Mei Lin turned off the heat and divided the fried rice between two plates. That sounds suspiciously like a protection racket. It is more complex than that, Tarask said, accepting the plate Mylin offered, but not entirely dissimilar. Galactic politics rarely differs from planetary politics in its fundamental nature, merely in its scale. They ate in silence for a few minutes, Tarask approaching the fried rice with the methodical precision of a scientist conducting an experiment. Finally, she set down her fork. She had declined chopsticks, citing insufficient dexterity parameters. "I have a proposal," Tarask said. "You will accompany me to the Galactic Assembly as a cultural representative of Earth. You will prepare selected dishes for key diplomatic functions. In exchange, the consortium will ensure favorable preliminary status for Earth in future membership considerations." Mylin stared at her. "You want me to cater an alien conference? I run a small farm and a weekend restaurant, not an interstellar food service. Your scale of operation is irrelevant," Tarask said. "It is the quality and authenticity that matter. Our analysts believe that the personal connection between creator and creation is essential to the impact. And if I say no?" Tarask's expression remained neutral, but something in her posture shifted. "Then we seek another human chef, though our research indicates you are optimal. Earth's status remains precarious. Other factions within the Assembly have different views on how developing planets should be managed." The threat wasn't subtle, but Mylin also sensed it wasn't personal. This was simply how the game was played at this level. She looked around her kitchen, at the cast iron pans that had belonged to her great-grandmother, at the herb garden visible through the window, at the photographs of 4 generations of her family working the same land. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I do it my way. I choose what to cook, how to cook it, and I need to bring my own ingredients and equipment." "That is acceptable," Tarask said, her ridge lifting slightly in what Mylin was beginning to interpret as satisfaction. "The assembly commences in 7 Earth days. We would depart in 5 to allow for preparation." 5 days, Mylin exclaimed. "I have a farm to run, animals to care for." "Arrangements can be made," Tarask said dismissively. "Temporary caretakers. Financial compensation." Mylin shook her head in disbelief. "This is insane. I'm seriously considering leaving my planet to cook pork for aliens because a dragon lady landed in my pasture." "I am not a dragon lady," Tarask said, sounding mildly offended. "That term suggests mythological attributes. I am a draconian, a species that evolved on a planet with high metallic content in its atmosphere, resulting in our distinctive dermal properties." "Right," Mylin said, rubbing her temples. "My mistake." She looked out the window at the strange vessel still sitting in her pasture, its surface now reflecting the moonlight like rippling water. Beyond it, the silhouettes of her pigs moved in the darkness, and further still, the lights of the nearest town twinkled in the distance, a town where no one had any idea that the fate of their planet was potentially being decided over leftover pork and fried rice. "Okay," she said finally, "I'll do it. But I'll need to make arrangements, and I want everything in writing, or whatever passes for a contract in your world." Tarask's scales shifted to a brighter copper tone, and her ridge extended slightly. "Excellent. The consortium appreciates your cooperation." She removed a small crystalline object from a compartment in her scaled armor and placed it on the table. It projected a holographic document that hovered in the air between them. "This outlines the terms of our agreement," Tarask explained. "It includes provisions for your safety, the temporary management of your property, and compensation for your services." Mylin stared at the floating alien text. "I can't read this." "Apologies," Tarask said, touching the crystal. The symbol shimmered and reformed into English. "Is this adequate?" Mylin scanned the document, which was surprisingly straightforward for an interstellar agreement. "It says here I'll be gone for approximately 1 standard lunar cycle. That's a month. You said this was just for a conference." "The assembly itself lasts 14 Earth days," Tarask explained. "But there are pre-conference negotiations and post-conference formalities. Your presence would be valuable throughout. Malin frowned. What about my pigs? My crops? As specified in Section 12, the consortium will provide caretakers with agricultural expertise equivalent to Earth's highest standards. And this part about biological sampling. Tarrasque's scales rippled in what might have been embarrassment. Standard protocol for off-world visitors. Non-invasive analysis only. I assure you. Mei Lin sighed deeply. I must be out of my mind. She reached out hesitantly, then pressed her finger against the hologram where a signature line glowed. The document absorbed the touch, her name appearing in flowing script. The agreement is sealed, Tarrasque said, her voice carrying a new note of formality. You are now officially a cultural envoy of Earth to the Galactic Assembly. She stood, her full height causing her head to nearly brush against the kitchen ceiling. I will return in 5 days to collect you and your required materials. Wait, Mei Lin said as Tarrasque moved toward the door. You're leaving. Just like that. I have preparations to make, Tarrasque said. Diplomatic channels to establish. Permissions to secure for your attendance. She paused at the door. Use this time wisely. Consider which aspects of your culinary heritage would best represent your species. The impression you make may influence how the galaxy views humanity for generations to come. With that weighty statement hanging in the air, Tarrasque slipped out into the night. From the window, Mei Lin watched as the alien returned to her vessel, the strange craft sealing seamlessly around her before rising silently into the star-filled sky. When it had vanished completely, Mei Lin sat heavily in her kitchen chair, staring at the empty plate where an alien diplomat had just eaten her leftover pork fried rice. Grandmother, she whispered to the empty room, I really hope your recipes are as good as I think they are, because apparently Earth's future might depend on them. Outside, a pig snorted in the darkness, as if in agreement. The galactic feast. The diplomatic station orbiting Proxima Centauri looked nothing like Mei Lin had imagined. There were no sleek, sterile corridors or minimalist design elements from human science fiction. Instead, the massive structure resembled a Renaissance palace that had collided with a coral reef, all sweeping organic curves interspersed with geometric precision, materials shifting from stone to crystal to living tissue, and back again as she followed Tarrasque through its winding passages. This is not what I expected, Mei Lin said, trying not to gawk as they passed a chamber where floating orbs of light conducted what appeared to be a symphonic performance for an audience of tentacled beings. The harmonious confluence was designed to incorporate architectural elements from all member species, Tarrasque explained, the theory being that no representative should feel entirely comfortable or entirely alienated. Mission accomplished, Mei Lin muttered, adjusting the strap of the large insulated bag slung over her shoulder. Behind them, hovering transport drones carried the rest of her equipment, a portable cooking station, ingredients packed in specialized containment units, and the small wooden box containing her grandmother's handwritten recipe book. The journey from Earth had taken less than a day, though Mei Lin's body insisted it had been much longer. Tarrasque had explained something about fold space and dimensional compression, but Mei Lin had been too busy trying not to vomit during the initial acceleration to pay attention. Now she was running on adrenaline, caffeine from the strange blue beverage Tarrasque had offered her, and the growing realization that she was the first human to ever set foot in this place. The Muldarian delegation has already begun their sensory presentations, Tarrasque said, her scales shifting to a darker, more serious tone. They have brought specialists from their 3 core worlds. Our intelligence suggests they have developed new aromatic compounds specifically for this assembly. No pressure, Mei Lin said dryly. Just competing against aliens who've evolved specifically to be good at this kind of thing. Tarrasque stopped abruptly, turning to face Mei Lin with an intensity that made the human take a step back. You misunderstand. The Muldarians have not evolved for culinary excellence. They have engineered themselves for it. Their society has spent millennia pursuing sensory perfection, altering their biology, developing technology solely for the enhancement of taste and smell. It is their cultural obsession, and they use it as leverage against other species. And you think my pulled pork is going to compete with that? Tarrasque's head ridge flared slightly. What I sampled on your farm contains something that Mulderian creations lack, something our analysts have been unable to quantify. The consortium believes this element will be recognized by the assembly representatives. What element? If we could define it, we would have replicated it, Tarrasque said, turning to continue down the corridor. Your task is not to defeat the Mulderians at their own game, but to change the rules entirely. They arrived at a vast chamber that Madeline could only describe as a marketplace crossed with a royal court. Hundreds of beings of indescribable variety moved through the space, some floating, some slithering, some walking on varying numbers of limbs. In the center, a series of elevated platforms held what appeared to be demonstration areas, where representatives showcased technologies, artifacts, or performances. The Cultural Exchange Forum, Tarrasque explained, a tradition that precedes the formal assembly. Here, species share achievements and innovations in a context free from direct negotiation. It's a talent show, Madeline said, smiling slightly. A galactic talent show. Tarrasque's scales rippled in what might have been amusement, an imprecise but not entirely inaccurate comparison. Your station is there. She gestured to an unoccupied platform near the center of the room. The consortium has registered you under the category of emerging species, cultural discovery. Sounds fancy. It is strategically advantageous. The category receives special attention, as the assembly values diversity and new perspectives. Tarrasque paused. I must attend to diplomatic protocols now. You have 3 hours before your official presentation. Use the time to prepare and observe the competition. Before Madeline could protest being left alone, Tarrasque had merged into the crowd of alien delegates, her copper scales disappearing among the rainbow of extraterrestrial forms. Great, Madeline sighed, adjusting her chef's apron, the one piece of familiar clothing she had insisted on bringing. Just me and my pork against the galaxy. She made her way to her designated platform, where the transport drones had already deposited her equipment. As she began unpacking, she couldn't help but notice the attention she was attracting. Various beings paused to observe her, some openly curious, others maintaining what she assumed was the interstellar equivalent of polite distance. You are the Earth representative. The voice came from behind her, musical and precise. Madeline turned to find herself facing a being that resembled nothing so much as a collection of iridescent feathers arranged around a central point where 2 large, multifaceted eyes gleamed. I am, she said, resisting the urge to extend her hand. Tarrasque had briefed her on the bewildering variety of greeting customs and advised her to simply bow slightly unless instructed otherwise. Fascinating, the being said, its feathers rippling in patterns that seemed to emphasize its words. We have been monitoring your planet for some time. Your species' approach to nutrient consumption is unusual. You mean our food? Food, the being repeated, as if tasting the word. Yes, most species evolve toward efficiency in energy intake. Humans appear to have moved in the opposite direction, devoting significant resources to the unnecessary elaboration of sustenance. We call that cooking, Madeline said, unable to keep a note of defensiveness from her voice. And it's not just about nutrition. It's about pleasure, culture, history. Precisely what makes it so interesting, the being interrupted, its feathers shifting to a brighter hue. I am Escaril, 3rd sensory evaluator of the Mulderian Federation. Madeline's heart sank. This was the competition. Nice to meet you, she managed. I have come to inform you that your presence here is noted with great interest by my delegation. Escaril continued. It is unusual for an unaffiliated planet to be granted presentation rights at the assembly. The Draconian Consortium sponsored us, Madeline said, continuing to unpack her equipment with hands that she forced to remain steady. Indeed, Escaril's feathers darkened slightly. A curious alliance. The Draconians are not known for their sensory appreciation. They are practical. The way it said the word made it sound like an insult. Sometimes practical people can surprise you, Madeline said, setting up her portable heat source. Perhaps. Escaril's eyes rotated in their sockets, examining Madeline's equipment. Your technology is primitive. It gets the job done. The Mulderian presentation will feature molecular reconfiguration of flavor compounds in real time, synced to neurological response monitoring. The feathered being's tone was casual, but the message was clear. You're outmatched. Madeline looked up from her work, meeting the alien's multifaceted gaze. You know where I come from. The best meals aren't made with the fanciest equipment. They're made with time, attention, and tradition. A charming perspective, Escaril said, feathers rustling in what might have been a dismissive gesture. I look forward to your traditional performance. With that, it drifted away, merging back into the crowd. Madeline exhaled slowly, trying to calm her nerves. She was beginning to understand the game being played here. This wasn't just about food. It was about influence, about proving that humanity deserved a seat at the table. She turned her attention back to her preparations, carefully unpacking the ingredients she had brought from Earth. Heritage pork that she had cured and smoked herself before the journey, pickled vegetables from her garden, rice grown in her neighbor's paddy, spices ground by hand. Each item represented not just her farm, but generations of culinary tradition from across Earth. As she worked, she observed the other presentations taking place around the chamber. One species appeared to be demonstrating a form of art that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, the images shifting and transforming depending on the viewer's perspective. Another group had created what seemed to be living architecture, structures that responded to and anticipated the needs of those who entered them. And then there were the Mulderians. Their platform was significantly larger than the others, dominated by a shimmering dome under which a team of the feathered beings worked at crystalline consoles. Periodically, they would present small morsels to delegates, who invariably responded with gestures that Madeline interpreted as expressions of amazement or delight. Molecular gastronomy on steroids, she muttered to herself. All flash, no soul. An astute observation. Madeline jumped at the voice, nearly dropping the container of soy sauce she was holding. A being that resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a bonsai tree hovered beside her platform, its translucent appendages gently pulsing. Ambassador Xelix, the being introduced itself, tendrils forming patterns that somehow conveyed both formality and warmth. Collective consciousness of the Sylphid Nebula. Madeline Zhang, she replied, setting down the sauce. Farmer from Earth. I am familiar with the designation farmer, Xelix said, its central core brightening. One who cultivates life for sustenance. A noble profession across many worlds. Madeline smiled, surprised by the unexpected validation. Thank you. Not everyone sees it that way. The Mulderians. Xelix observed, several tendrils gesturing toward the elaborate display, believe that true sophistication lies in separation from natural processes. They view direct cultivation as primitive. Their loss, Madeline said. Perhaps. Xelix's translucent body pulsed with what might have been amusement. The assembly has grown weary of Mulderian sensory dominance. Their influence in trade negotiations has become disproportionate. So I've heard. Many delegations would welcome an alternative perspective. Xelix continued, its voice lowering to what Madeline could only describe as a conspiratorial whisper, despite the being having no discernible mouth. Particularly one that honors the connection between sustenance and its origins. Before Madeline could respond, Xelix had drifted away, merging back into the crowd as smoothly as it had appeared. No pressure, Madeline said to herself, just potentially reshaping galactic politics with a pork sandwich. By the time her official presentation was scheduled to begin, Madeline had completed her preparations. The platform now held a simple but elegant display. a traditional Chinese ceramic serving platter surrounded by smaller dishes, each containing a different preparation of the ingredients she had brought. The centerpiece was her signature dish, slow-smoked pork with a glaze made from her grandfather's fermented bean paste recipe, accompanied by pickled vegetables, steamed rice, and a small bowl of clear broth made from the pork bones. As she worked, a crowd had gathered. Representatives from dozens of species now surrounded her platform, their curiosity evident even across the vast differences in physiology and expression. Mei Lin spotted Tarask at the edge of the gathering, her copper scales distinguishing her from the other draconians who had joined her. And there, directly across from Mei Lin, stood Escaril and a delegation of Moldarians, their feathers shifting in patterns that somehow conveyed disdain despite their alien nature. Representatives of the Galactic Assembly, Mei Lin began, her voice steadier than she had expected. I am honored to share with you a taste of Earth's culinary heritage. She gestured to the dishes before her. What I offer isn't the most advanced or exotic creation you'll encounter today. It doesn't feature molecular manipulation or neurological enhancement. What it does contain is something else, a connection to our planet's history, to the cycles of growth and harvest, to the generations of hands that have refined these techniques over centuries. As she spoke, she began serving small portions onto individual plates, which the hovering drones distributed among the gathered delegates. This dish tells the story of my family, who have worked the same land for 5 generations. It tells the story of the animals we raise, the crops we grow, and the traditions we maintain. In a very real sense, when you taste this food, you are experiencing not just flavors, but history, my history, Earth's history. The delegates began to sample the food, their reactions as varied as their physiologies. Some used appendages that resembled hands or tentacles, others seemed to absorb the food directly through specialized membranes, and still others employed devices that Mei Lin assumed were adaptive technology for species whose biology was incompatible with Earth cuisine. For a moment, the vast chamber was silent except for the ambient sounds of the station. Then, gradually, a wave of communication spread through the gathered delegates. Chirps, hums, flashes of light, rippling colors, and sounds beyond human hearing spectrum. Mei Lin couldn't understand the specific reactions, but the general sentiment was unmistakable: appreciation. One by one, delegates approached her platform, each communicating in their own way what appeared to be gratitude or approval. A being composed entirely of crystalline structures that chimed melodiously as it moved presented her with a small glowing object that Tarask later explained was a rare honor. Another delegate, resembling an animated tapestry of living threads, wove a pattern in the air that apparently signified deep respect. From her position across the chamber, Mei Lin could see the Moldarian delegation huddled in what appeared to be intense discussion, their feathers flickering rapidly in patterns that suggested alarm or disagreement. You have created quite a stir, Tarask said, approaching the platform as the initial rush of delegates began to disperse. The Sylphid ambassador has formally requested Earth's input on the Vega Quadrant negotiations, a significant development. All this over pork? Mei Lin asked, still somewhat dazed by the response. Not just the food itself, Tarask said, her scales shifting to a warmer copper tone. Your presentation emphasized elements that resonate with many species: connection to place, continuity of tradition, the relationship between producer and creation. These are values that transcend biological differences, values the Moldarians don't share. Tarask's head ridge flattened slightly. The Moldarians have pursued sensory perfection at the expense of connection. Their creations are technically flawless but lack context. Many species find this philosophically troubling, though few have been willing to challenge Moldarian dominance openly. Until now, Mei Lin said, looking around at the delegates still sampling her food, still communicating their reactions to one another. Indeed, Tarask's amber eyes gleamed with what might have been pride. The assembly convenes formally tomorrow. The consortium requests your presence at the opening session. As what? A chef. As Earth's cultural envoy, Tarask said, her voice carrying a new note of formality. Your world has made a significant impression today. There is interest in establishing more formal relations with your planet. Mei Lin stared at her. I'm a farmer, not a diplomat. Today, you were both, Tarask replied, and quite effective at each. Before Mei Lin could respond, a commotion at the far side of the chamber drew their attention. The Muldarian delegation was approaching, led by Escaril, whose feathers were now pulsing with intensity. Earth representative, Escaril announced, its musical voice carrying across the now quieter chamber. The Muldarian Federation acknowledges your presentation. Mei Lin straightened, sensing the importance of the moment. Thank you. We request, Escaril continued, each word precisely measured, the exchange of culinary knowledge. Specifically, the techniques employed in your preparation. A murmur ran through the watching delegates. Tarask stiffened beside her, and Mei Lin realized this was significant, perhaps even unprecedented. The Muldarians wish to learn from you, Tarask whispered. This has never occurred in recorded assembly history. Mei Lin considered the request, looking at the feathered beings before her, then at the diverse gathering of delegates watching the exchange. She thought about her grandmother, who had insisted that recipes were meant to be shared, not hoarded. About her father, who believed that good food could bridge any gap, heal any rift. I would be honored to share my techniques, she said finally, on one condition. Escaril's feathers stilled. State your condition. That the knowledge be used to foster understanding between our worlds, not as leverage in negotiations. Mei Lin met the alien's multifaceted gaze steadily. Food should bring people together, not divide them. For a long moment, Escaril was motionless. Then, slowly, its feathers began to shift into a pattern that Mei Lin hadn't seen before, concentric rings of color moving outward from its center. Acceptable, it said finally. The Muldarian Federation agrees to your terms. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien communications, lights flashing, appendages gesturing, sounds ranging from deep rumbles to high-pitched trills. Even without translation, Mei Lin understood. This was applause. You have accomplished something remarkable, Tarask said quietly. The Muldarians have acknowledged an equal in the sensory arts. The political implications are significant. I just cooked my grandmother's recipe, Mei Lin said, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had apparently just occurred. You did much more than that, Tarask replied. You represented your species with honor and wisdom. The consortium chose well. In the days that followed, Mei Lin found herself at the center of diplomatic activity that far exceeded her expectations. The formal assembly proceedings were conducted in a chamber that resembled an ancient amphitheater crossed with a quantum computer, delegates arranged in concentric circles with translation devices, ensuring universal communication. The Vega Quadrant negotiations, which Tarask had described as the consortium's primary objective, were resolved with surprising efficiency. The Draconians received priority access to the crystalline formations they required, while other species were granted various concessions that Mei Lin only partially understood. What was clear, however, was that Earth's unexpected cultural impact had shifted the balance of influence away from traditional power blocks. On the final day of the assembly, Mei Lin was summoned to a private chamber where representatives from 7 major species awaited her. Tarask stood among them, her scales gleaming like polished copper in the chamber's ambient light. Mei Lin Zhang of Earth announced a being composed of interlocking geometric shapes that somehow conveyed authority despite their abstract form. The assembly has reached a unanimous decision regarding your world. Mei Lin's heart raced. This was far beyond anything she had anticipated when she'd agreed to Tarask's proposal on her farm just weeks ago. Earth is hereby granted protected development status, the being continued. No species may interfere with your planet's natural evolution or make direct contact outside of authorized diplomatic channels. Additionally, a permanent seat has been established for Earth representation at future assemblies. Mei Lin looked at Tarask, whose head ridge was fully extended in what she now recognized as an expression of satisfaction or pride. "This is a significant honor," Tarask explained. "It ensures your world can develop according to its own path while maintaining a voice in galactic affairs. All this because of a pork sandwich?" Mei Lin asked, still struggling to grasp the implications. Ambassador Xilix, the jellyfish-like being she had met earlier, pulsed gently. "Not because of the food itself, but because of what it represented. Your presentation demonstrated values that many species recognize as essential for peaceful coexistence: respect for tradition, connection to origins, willingness to share knowledge freely. In time," added Escaril, whose feathers now moved in patterns that suggested respect rather than disdain, "Earth may become a bridge between different philosophical approaches within the Assembly." "This is valuable." Mei Lin nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "So what happens now? Do I just go home and pretend none of this happened?" "You return to your farm," Tarask said. "Continue your work. The consortium will establish discrete communication protocols should your expertise be required again. When your world is ready for broader contact, the groundwork will already exist. And in the meantime, I just keep cooking." "Indeed," Tarask said, her scaled mouth curving in what Mei Lin now recognized as a smile. "Though perhaps with the knowledge that your just cooking has already changed the course of galactic politics." 3 weeks later, Mei Lin stood in her field as the morning sun painted the landscape in gold. Her pigs rooted contentedly in the dirt, oblivious to the fact that samples of their DNA now existed in a database light years away. The farm looked exactly as she had left it, the consortium's caretakers having maintained everything with meticulous precision. Only the circular pattern in the east pasture, where Tarask's vessel had first landed, suggested that anything unusual had occurred. That and the small crystalline device now sitting on her kitchen windowsill, a direct line to the stars, disguised as an ordinary paperweight. Mei Lin breathed deeply, taking in the familiar sense of earth and growing things. Tonight, she would reopen her weekend restaurant. She would serve the same dishes she always had to the same local customers who had no idea that their humble farmer had briefly been Earth's ambassador to the galaxy. But as she cooked, she would know that somewhere out there, beings of unimaginable variety were discussing Earth, were thinking about humanity with new respect, all because of a meal shared with honesty and tradition. "Grandmother," she said softly to the morning air, "you always said food could change the world. I never imagined you meant the whole galaxy." In the distance, a gleam of copper caught the sunlight. A drone, almost too small to see, keeping discreet watch. Mei Lin smiled and waved, then turned back toward her farmhouse. She had recipes to plan, pigs to feed, a life to continue, and perhaps someday more cosmic diplomacy to conduct, one meal at a time.